actually think that we're at a point, inflection point, where I think the middle class is going to get eradicated completely, and they're not going to be able to buy
No.
anything at all. This is the Mooncast.
See you, space cowboy.
That chair looks really, really good, man. You're in Thailand right now, right?
Yeah, I love this place, man. Thailand is such an awesome place. Like, I mean, if you've not been here, like, it's worth
What are
checking
the
out.
what are the crypto laws like over there?
Actually, I don't know if it's super friendly. I think what it is like a couple like really good like families. So there's this guy called Top. I met him back in 2019. He was just starting an exchange called BitCub. Today, BitCub is like the largest exchange in Thailand, and there's big ass like billboards right outside my house for
Yeah,
BitCub. So it's just insane. But I think it's like if you're tied up with with the government, then you're likely to like if you have investors that are like like well connected, then you're likely to get through. But if not, probably not. But there is a very nascent like on like crypto scene from the perspective of like individual meetups and stuff. So like we're going to one today, matter of fact. It's the
yeah.
ICP meetup, Internet Computer
ICP,
Meetup. Yeah,
ICP,
yeah,
Internet Computer.
yeah. So they have
Oh,
a
are you
meetup happening.
are you into that project?
No, I'm just checking it out. I mean, every time they do like sort of meetups over here, it's like the same people that are likely to go. So it's good to sort of to network, see what the scene is, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, there are quite
Yeah.
a few people here investing, and a lot of like big ecosystem players will come here as well. So we went to a dinner the other day. It's like 30 like people from all over the world, investors from Singapore, like pretty much everywhere that made
Yeah.
their way over here.
Yeah. Can you do a quick intro, just like a little bit to try and showcase like how long you've been into the crypto space and who you are?
Sure. Okay, okay. Well, my name is Jason Fernandes, as you know.
Yeah.
So um, my experience is background is really in investments. So sort of most recently, I was at IBC, International Blockchain Consulting, subsequently NFT Technologies. Post that, I set up AdLunam, which is launchpad investment platform. We basically accelerate, incubate a lot of projects in the lead up to their public sale. Um, Sort of got into crypto around 2013, 2012. Around
Yeah.
2013, I started writing about it. So I wrote an article July 2013 on in India's largest selling men's magazine called Bitcoin for Dummies. And at the time, Bitcoin was $13, and I bought some just because by virtue of like writing about it, I figured it might as well own some, right? So I bought a couple
Yeah.
$100 worth, and pretty much had that for like many years, and then it started to take off around 2019, 20 is like when it started to really the graph of usership had really started blowing up. And so around that time, I co-founded a company called AE Token with Gene Hoffman's, and when he fed a job. So Gene is the guy who founded emusic.com back in the 90s, the very first guy to ever sell music on the internet. And now he is over at Chia Networks with Bram Cohen. Bram is the guy who invented BitTorrent, of course. So yeah, so post then I was sort of got into evaluating tokens for to try to figure out which would be good tokens for our portfolio, because we like IBC had sort of made a decision that they would sort of focus on taking payments in tokens as opposed to fiat. So they needed somebody to sort of understand kind of what would be good fits for our portfolio from IBC perspective. And then, of course, subsequently, I joined NFT Tech, which went public on the New York Stock Exchange in Canada. And then after that, I went over to sort of set up, basically continue a lot of the same work, right? Because we were basically launching a lot of projects and investing in them. And so, sort of setting up AdLunam, which is an investment platform, was kind of a natural progression for that. Sort of helps coalesce some of the work I was doing, and some of my colleagues here at not my now colleagues at AdLunam were doing anyway, and sort of build a organizational structure around it that made sense and it was sort of useful from an ecosystem perspective to launch projects in the lead up to the IEO. Because I mean, if you think about it, or the IEO for that matter, if you think about it, a lot of these so-called advisors, like they have very little experience. A lot of the advisors that we see on these decks, they have very little experience in launching projects and taking it to a public sale. You know, they might have sector specific experience. So, for example, like a company is doing an MP3. Let's say that they're doing like an audio play or something. So they might have the guy who founded MP3.com or something like that there, right? Like those are sector specific. But that's not going to get you a really successful public sale. Like you need a whole different set of advisors, right? And those advisors are the guys that have like relationships with institutional investors, relationships with exchanges, launchpads to get you where you need to be. So that's sort of those guys are the guys you really need from the perspective of launching a project, regardless, assuming it's a good project. You need those sort of resources to get there. And I think like I used to advise a lot of projects, and but I noticed that a lot of the like it was really nebulous, right? So it's like, oh, I have this friend over here at this company, so I know these guys. And then when you actually go to them, you're like, hey, can you now activate some of these relationships? Well, all those relationships tend to be, fugazi, like not really existing, right? And
Yeah.
and we noticed that a lot. Like, and so I was like, hey, if you think about a launchpad and an investment platform from that perspective, it's almost like the company manifestation of an advisor in that it has the relationships with the institutional investors, has relationships with exchanges, and these are formal relationships because like we made announcements for them, and they've done the same, and so these aren't like a nebulous sort of like I have a friend who works there, right? So now you can actually start like very quickly evaluating whether a company can really get you the resources that you need in order to be successful, because you say, hey, what exchanges are you partnered with? So we're partnered with like I think the top five. I think we're partnered with five out of the top 15 exchanges by ATH ROI. Very close. Well, partnered with like at least four or five of the top launchpads, again by ATH ROI and
Which
average
ones?
ROI. So, for example, Communitas, Engine Starter,
Yeah.
WePad. I'm an advisor over
Coinlist?
at WePad. No, not CoinList. But if you actually look at the list, CoinList has only appeared in the top 10. I want to say it was in February. That was the first appearance. So we've been
Yeah.
monitoring the crypto rank, like ranking systems for like the last 2 years now. And
Yeah.
and what will happen is sometimes you'll see a project that is happens to be really successful. Let's pick three launchpads. So those launchpads are in the top 10 that month. But what you really need to see is which of the launchpads are like consistently in the top 10, and that will give you a better idea of what are the launchpads, because again they're in the top 10 because they're launching projects that have the highest all-time high returns. So they're doing
Yeah.
something right, which is giving them that it's not like, oh, I just like this company, that's why it's in the top 10, right? So we started looking at like what are the repeat, like how often these companies repeat. So for example, I think Communitas repeats four times in the top 10 in 2020. So we looked at 2022 data, 2023 data, and then the first 2 months of 2024. And try to see how often these repeat. One of the companies that repeats a lot, actually the number one repeating company is Engine Starter. So Engine Starter has in is was in the top 10 out of the 12 months in 2022, and I think it's 7 out of the 10 months in 2023, and then it's even higher in some cases, I believe, than Dowmake. We have the data, but that's how we track it. So Engine Starter and we have so consequently we're very close to Engine Starter. Engine Starter CEO is an advisor at AdLunam. We're partner. Our two companies are partners, so we launch projects. We co-launch projects, and then of course I mentioned Lawrence Hudson was CTO at Paid, which is also a top 10 launchpad. WePad has been lately, in the top 10. So I'm an advisor over at WePad. That's based out of Dubai.
I thought Kyle
Yeah,
Chase was leading the paid network, wasn't he?
yeah, he is. So Kyle is the
Okay. Okay.
CEO of the Master Ventures and Paid Network. So the CTO was Lawrence Hudson. So
Ah, the
Launchpads.
CTO.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So the CTO at so Massive Ventures, he was both CTO at Massive Ventures, and then he was CTO at Paid Network because he built out the Paid Network. And then when he
Mm.
left Paid, he became CTO, or shortly after that, he became CTO at AdLunam, basically.
Yeah.
Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Are you familiar with Bluezilla?
I think we have. I'll have to double check. I seem to remember that we have a group with them. Why is that a company you're trying to connect with?
Yeah, no, just because they had really good returns last cycle, so I was wondering if that was another one that you guys maybe were
Yeah,
potentially looking at or
actually,
investigating.
so what you should really look at is crypto rank, and they've got a thing for IDOs, and you'll notice that Bluezilla isn't actually even on there. So you look at IDO Launchpad ROI, and you see ChangeGPT is doing really well. That's been the case for a while.
Yeah.
Downlink of Fjord Foundry. Let's see. WeWare. You see WeWare over here. Cetify. Cetify is doing really well. Coinlist is here, but I don't even see what was the company you just mentioned. Obviously, I just started this right here.
Blue, Bluezilla.
Bluezilla. Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, I've of course heard of it, but it's not even on the on. If you look on the list right now, it doesn't
Yeah.
even show up. This month. Let me just see. Here we go. So I'll tell you what you have is Oxbow, Bounce, Field Foundry, Downmaker, Seedify, Edgestar, Trust Swap, Launchpool, Pools, Fade, Polkastarter, Impulsive Finance, Bullpork, Selenium, and then some others. So that's your top 10 of currently.
When you look at the dynamics of Launchpads and you see what's going on right now in the crypto space with airdrops, do you see airdrops as a new form of liquidity bootstrapping and marketing to be able to attract users at a much cheaper cost and with less headache, less friction, less intermediaries in between?
Yeah, so I think airdrops have been around forever, right? The thing that generally tends to happen with airdrops is there are airdrop hunters. In fact, there are literally websites called airdrop hunters where they'll try to say, okay, you do X, Y, and Z, and here you get some free tokens. And the people who spend their entire lives like following this and doing it to get tokens, not so much to add value to the system, just sort of to like figure out how to do that. But the flip side of that is in some cases they help build hype that is necessary for that project. Now, one of the things of like when it comes to like at Ludum and kind of the concepts of like engaged short that we do is like that is sort of coming from the perspective that like the 80% of the people that are like building hype of our projects, putting out memes and so on, don't actually really have the funds oftentimes to invest in those projects. So, or have very, very minimum funds. So they are often doing these things like airdrop hunting, which is not really adding value, where they could, for example, build engagement and so on. So that's sort of like what the concept of AdLunam is, with our engaged shore platform in the first place, is to sort of get people that are building the hype, that are talking about the project, to have allow them to get allocation in projects as well. So that's sort of like what
How
the
do
what the
you
whole.
how do you build the engagement up? How does that work?
Yeah. So we have this thing called engage to earn, right? So we have forums for each project, and the more that you engage on these forums, so that includes, for example, you can earn points for like logging in every day. You can earn points for how many replies that you post, how many replies get people reply to you. So it's essentially like imagine a gamified version of Reddit, right? Actually, it comes down to like if you think about where the whole Wall Street bets thing took off, right? Like Wall Street bets is not the ideal on Reddit is not the ideal investment platform. You know, it's behaving as an investment platform, and you really have no idea who these people are. There's
Yeah.
guys with really crazy names. Yeah, and so if you think about what an
Yeah.
investment platform, the thing that builds the only data that you'd want to track if you're looking at investment is how the person who's talking, how their investments are doing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the data that's important. So like on our investment plan, like on Adlumin, when you join, you connect your wallet. We essentially figure out which tokens that you have. We give you badges for those tokens, so that when you post, you have those badges like next to your name, so people can tell, for example, that you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, and then your value in terms of what you're saying is immediately, people know when to pay
Increase.
attention, basically,
Yeah,
right?
but
So instead
but
of
but
scrolling, yeah, good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say because don't you then have to, but you have to dox your, doesn't that go against the sort of the anonymity portion of crypto and stuff? So you kind of have
No,
to
that's a
dox
really
it.
good. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good point. So actually, I think and you know what, I've thought about this a lot. I think what it comes down to is that there's two groups of people. One is people that have literally they're super doxed anyways, and they realize that if they want to get anywhere, they have to be doxed.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to trust you in this industry. Like I'll tell you straight up, like in crypto, you're investing in the entrepreneur, and they say that there's no time that's more true than the crypto industry, right? Like I've made investments in companies and then subsequently found out that because there's no, it's not like you get a board seat, it's not like you have any granular control or understanding of where that those funds go.
Yeah.
There's in many of these companies don't have CFOs. This is the whole problem with the FTX thing. So you're really trusting the entrepreneur. Like I've had, like I said, I've had a case where this guy, this person I invested in was like I went over to visit him in this place in this other country that he happened to be at, and he was living in this palatial place. And I go and I'm like wondering why he's, and then I realized that's he's charging that to the company. In other words, I'm paying for that. So
Yeah.
I'm in the
Yeah.
same place, living at a cheaper location, but paying for him to live at a nicer place. Maybe not
Yeah.
solely, but I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of crazy to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And then of course there's one whole school of entrepreneurship where there's guys who will be like, okay, look, what I'm going to do is, take as much money as possible and fail big, right? It's the Adam Smith sort of strategy where they'll fail really big. They'll make sure they get a lot of publicity and so on, and then they'll start up another company. Now with all this publicity, that failed company is paid for,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and now
crazy.
suddenly they're like heroes, right? So essentially,
Yeah.
like you're passively investing in the individual, right? So you kind of, on one sense, you want to be doxxed. Like I have my information everywhere. Like you can, if you can like Google me and find out like my career since I was like 12.
Yeah.
It's all there, right? And I realize that that's necessary in order for somebody to like be able to give me a, like, if you're going to invest with me in AdLunam, for example, you
Yeah.
have to be able to like figure out who you're investing in. I know that because I feel that way when I'm investing, right? So I
Yeah.
think to
Yeah.
some extent that's going to happen. But the anonymity part, I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to have these sort of DID things where you're going to have these personas. Let's say like CryptoPunks are a really good example, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
could be like related to like some sort of digital ID domain. Like I have
Yeah.
Jason.x, for example. I own Jason.x. And so I could, for example, come up with a persona that reflects Jason.x that is maybe distinct from myself, right?
Yeah.
But that is consistent with that profile. Are you familiar with Matt Villain? Matt Villain?
No. No.
The musician. Okay, so Matt Villain is this musician, rap musician, and what he does is he wears this mask. It's like the MF Doom mask.
Ah. Okay. 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 Yeah.
From the
Of course.
comics,
Of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he's just like he's playing music and stuff like that, like a really good musician. Anyway, he got sued because he did like another concert, and like people showed up and they're like, hey, wait a second, like this dude's like fat and MF Doom is like a skinny dude, like what's going on, right? And so he got sued by the promoters who said, hey, listen, like you didn't, that was just a dude wearing the mask,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
Bad Villain, the artist, and his argument was like, listen, the artist is the mask,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Is that brilliant? So
Yeah.
he's like, whoever's wearing the mask is the artist at the time, is Matt Villain.
So it's great for, yeah. That's what I'm alluding to, because how I see it is there needs to be a way, maybe some kind of zero knowledge proof technology or something sorts, where you have, a combination of digital identifiers where you're still able to identify who that person is, but without revealing who that person actually is.
Right.
So I think like that's probably the sweet spot that you kind of want to be in to be able to get more people on board and massively adopted, because a lot of people, it's kind of risky, right? Because imagine like I dox my wallet and say I have, I'm not gonna dox how much I have, but let's say I have $1 million or something in terms of total token allocations, and someone is able to see who I am, and they're able, and they can just simply do a quick Google search and then know my address, know my business address, and they can come to my house and try to rob me, and that's a little
Yeah,
bit quite
welcome to a
dangerous.
life of a crypto influencer, bro. No, I mean
Yeah.
for real, because what it is because I'll tell you what it is, right? If you're a director of a company, for
Yeah.
example, and that company has raised funds. Well,
Yeah.
who would have those access to those funds? It would
You.
be just that one person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if there's like a million people in the company. It would be the director of the company that would have access to those
Yeah.
funds. Well, how much of
Yeah.
those funds
Yeah.
are raised as public, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all somebody has to do, in a bad situation, let's not give anybody any ideas, right? So this is actually one of the issues with crypto, but there's really not very much you can do about it. Basically, it's just
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, look at Evan Luthor; he walks around with security everywhere.
Yeah, it's man, it's terrible, honestly. And even for me, like I think it doesn't even matter because depending on the location that you're at, if you're like in the UK, I mean, forget about it. I mean, trying to have money in the UK it's a nightmare. You got to bring security everywhere. But if you're in Dubai, I mean, it's
Oh,
no
it's
one's
easy.
gonna touch you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nobody commits any crimes in Dubai. Like those
I
guys
mean,
are
did you?
serious about it.
It's crazy because when I look at it, I see stuff like Uniswap right now. I don't know if you saw the SEC just filed a lawsuit on
Oh,
Uniswap.
that's okay.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the space
I
and
expected something like that too, because
what'd you say?
basically it's. Oh, I mean, I expected that. So
Yeah.
you'd be surprised. Like I was investing a lot in 2019, 2020, and I talked to guys who go like, well, we're a DEX, so we think we don't have to adhere to any regulation, and I'm like, oh, well, good luck with that. I mean, if you think that doing things in a decentralized manner is going to basically free you from securities regulations, you have another thought coming, right? And by the way, this
Yeah.
also happened with NFTs. So what they try to do is like when it became this whole thing where you have a security token and a utility token, then they said, okay, you can have these NFTs, but then nobody knew what NFTs were, right? Initially, and people thought it was just like pretty pictures. And so then like some smart guys were like, cool, let's add some value to this. That's very similar to a security, but we'll call it an NFT. And until people catch on, like we'll be fine. But the SEC
Yeah.
is smart. Like they don't care what you call an asset. They're gonna look at like whether it adheres to the Howey test. Whether it like whether it's people try to in a common goal try to make money and so on, right? They have like five
Yeah.
prong test. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you call it an NFT or a token or a utility token or a security token. They're looking at the asset itself, right? So then
Yeah.
you have a bunch of people, they got in trouble for that. And then now, eventually they're going to hit, if they're going to hit, centralized exchanges, they're not going to let decentralized exchanges slide, right? That would defeat the purpose.
But what do you do when the decentralized exchange launched anonymously? Like, how do you track that? They just put the piece of code up and then they, what are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
well, I mean, I think you track the money, right? You'd be surprised how easy it is to track funds. So I was over at an exchange earlier, and we used a company called CipherTrace. Like they had a presentation, and they showed us in detail how funds are tracked, like from the Mujahideen, like into the Mujahideen's wallet, and then from there to like other people. Like there was a teacher who would like set money from his Binance wallet to some like Islamic terror group or something, and like they found
Oh
that
wow.
yeah. So it's really easy to track funds.
Yeah.
It's much
How,
in
how do
fact
they
it's
know
like
it's an Islamic terrorist group? Did they dox their
oh yeah
public
yeah.
wallet?
Well, no, what happens is as soon as a wallet is as soon as a wallet is identified, it becomes flagged, and then that goes to like other intelligence people, and then what'll end up happening is that wallet will send a bunch of funds to like let's say three different wallets. So very
Yeah.
clearly that like those wallets are probably this. That guy might take some funds off to a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
Now he's KYC'd on that exchange. So now you just
Yeah.
track
Yeah.
back. Like you just follow the money basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes absolute sense for sure. And so I want to talk about a little bit about meme coins.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know what your thoughts are on meme coins, and they've become such a big narrative so far during this bull run. And do you think that they're here to stay? And if so, what are your top like meme coins that you
Uh,
that you that
so
you look
okay,
at?
so I'll tell you. I don't think any individually are here to stay. I think the concept is probably here to stay because people are like they'll always go ahead and spend money on things like for fun,
Yeah,
for reasons other than investment, right? I mean,
yeah,
you can buy like any number of things for different reasons, right? Like you can buy it because you want to display it to other people that you have it. So by the way, like if you connect your wallet and you show off your tokens, right? Like so actually, this is alluding to what we were talking about earlier. So you can have essentially two different types of identity, where you have like it's like V for Vendetta almost, right? Like, or anonymous, if you consider it, right? Like, so that can be your identity. You have like something, you have your own domain, right? Like your Web3 domain, and that is
Yeah.
connected to an NFT, and that's connected to, let's say, all the tokens. So you can choose to display some of your tokens over there, and then
Yeah.
figure it out. But I think with meme coins, I don't think that they have like they're really like it's painful, right? Because as crypto like as people deep in the crypto industry, we're always telling people that oh no, there's real utility in these tokens, and then it's like
Yeah.
this makes sense at all, and then these memes come in and it like makes no sense, and but that's what they hear about because that's the thing that gets them clicks, right? So you have like
Yeah.
Elon Musk talking about these really terrible coins, Shiba and stuff. It's funny, the Daily Mail, which is like a UK newspaper, like they got in touch with me asking me if Shiba Inu would ever reach $1, and this is like months ago, and I'm like, yeah, like when pigs fly, like that, like this,
Yeah.
like in order for them to do that, like because the amount of different things that would have to happen for that to happen in anything approaching, real life is just
Yeah.
like never gonna happen. But so I said, look, and they're even worse than Dogecoin because at least Dogecoin is a blockchain. It's its own blockchain, right? I mean, at
Yeah.
least that. Shiba was a token. I think now they build a blockchain underneath it, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But I
But I
mean,
mean,
it's crazy because when you look at some of these ecosystems like AVAX and BNB, they're actually launching ecosystem meme coin funds for people to build meme coins. And
oh
I'm just like, what
no,
is that?
really?
What is all
That
that about?
really
Yeah.
that is oh wow. That's so stupid. What a way to completely like get rid of any credibility you have by creating a fund. I mean, when you create these ecosystem funds, by the way, like we've all looked at layer one protocols that we may have invested in or whatever, and essentially like when you right after you invest in layer one, one of the problems are invested in layer one. So it's not even like I had a friend like I was putting together a Bitcoin layer like a Bitcoin something built on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? And it was like a scaling solution. And this is with some other people. I wasn't the main guy, obviously. I was just sort of like helping them get financing and putting it together from a
Yeah.
company perspective. And so the money was basically like, well, listen, getting them the $1 million they need right now, we can do that tomorrow. The question
Yeah.
is whether they can get the 60 million 8 months, 9 months from now, which they'll need to build out the blockchain to then
Yeah.
to fund the various ecosystem things that they need to do it over that. So that like it was really funny because I was trying to explain to this guy about how it wasn't like he was really focused on raising the $1 million, and I was like,
Yeah.
yo, that's not a problem. Like
Yeah.
nobody's worried about that. Like a lot of us can put that in ourselves individually.
Yeah.
The question
Yeah.
is nobody wants to do that unless you know that in 8 months you have a really good shot at raising that much more. In order to do that, you have to have certain other things in place that they didn't have in place. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, but yeah. So what I mean is that you need an ecosystem fund in order to create to have the chain build actual utility. The last thing you'd want to do because that utility is ultimately the utility that makes your chain useful. But the
Yes.
last thing you want to do is fund memes on your like I don't see the logic there unless you're literally just trying to be like hey we're like Solana is doing really big on meme coins, but I mean like they like I remember like a year ago when I was looking at like fast growing blockchains, I was like, hey, the best way to look at try to predict is to try to see like where the developers are going, right? And they were like,
Yeah.
Solana was like one of the fastest growing developer ecosystems. So I was like, okay, well this is gonna but
Yeah.
blow up rather. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's absolutely insane, man. But what are your top three narratives like going into this bull run, like before the halving? Like, what would you say is like the number three areas in which a lot of investors are probably gonna place their money at?
so I think things are changing a lot and really
Yeah.
fast. But I see a lot of like I think the Bitcoin like a Bitcoin scaling solution, Bitcoin
Yes.
sort of these layer twos built off of Bitcoin. I think that's going to be like a very compelling narrative, particularly because you see like Bitcoin NFTs, and as the price of Bitcoin is like increases, that also means that like the associated costs with everything also increase. So it becomes increasingly important to have scaling solutions around that, which is something that they really
Yeah.
haven't talked talked about much. So I think that's going to grow if it's not already. I think Bitcoin season,
Yeah.
that's gonna be a thing. There are a few, like every bull run there's like a new layer one. I think that like Sui was doing really well last time. I think, I don't know. I mean, there still might be some profits left in Sui. I think there'll
Yeah.
be another like another layer one that sort of gets a
Yeah.
lot of interest, and then you'll have like your associated launch pads that are launching off of those layer ones that will also get some interest, and then the wallets and stuff. But I think like, yeah, that would be one. Those sort of infrastructure plays. Um, then of course the AI thing is like
Yeah.
hitting everywhere. I think you look at the top three projects, the top 10 projects in 2023. Three of them are AI projects. So that's AI Pad, no, yeah,
Chain
what,
GPT.
Change GPT, and then there's one other GPT, something or the other.
Yeah. Maybe
Uh,
it's PAL. It's PAL. PAL
no,
maybe.
no, it's another thing like GPT something, but there's like three of
Yeah.
them, which I, by the way,
Yeah.
all three of them are launched, were launched by WePad, which is
Okay.
the launchpad out of Dubai. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I think that's a narrative. Obviously, that's increasing. The metaverse thing, like I think, I hear a lot about it, and it's the question is like when are they going to figure out like an actual use case for it? Because like I think it comes down to when it's a user interface ultimately, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
people want data or they want an experience, and the question is what is the latency between them wanting that experience and them experiencing the experience that they envision, right? So if
Yeah.
you want data from, like, I've gone to the Kraken. I think Kraken has a place on Decentraland, if I'm not mistaken, and it's
Yeah.
like cool. It's a building. If you want to, and then you look around and you're like, okay, well that's great. I can get that on Google, but it's real. And then you like say, okay, cool, let me trade, right? And it's the trading interface. Like if there is a trading interface, it'll be like super rudimentary, right? And doing it would be a more painful experience than getting on your phone and doing that. Which is why, like, even if you think about like most people don't use, even voice recognition is great, but most people don't use it, right? Like all day. It's not like
Yeah.
you're like talking to your phone, open Outlook, read email. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a
Yeah.
latency involved. It's a latency
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
Like it can do that, but it's like getting to the data is that much farther. So
Yeah.
if you have a metaverse where like it's about information, getting information, there are more efficient ways to get information. It's about connecting with other people. There have to be significant amounts of people over there for it to be worth
Yeah.
that. And then you
Yeah.
wouldn't have that sort of critical mass on any
Yeah.
one of them thing.
Hey bro, I'm just trolling is something that will not just challenge your perspective, but also touch your heart and soul. It's a book that defies convention, blending art and literature into a thought-provoking masterpiece. A reflective piece of provocative art that tackles societal constructs from angles you've never considered. Hey bro, I'm just trolling delves into the very essence of our existence. It questions the technology that surrounds us, challenges our notions of beauty, stares unflinchingly into the eyes of death, and questions the boundaries of freedom. It scrutinized the educational system that molds our very future. This book is a journey, an exploration of shared human experience, and it's a work of art that refuses to be confined by tradition. It's a canvas painted with words, a melody of thought, and a testament to the power of creativity in a world dominated by algorithms and data. Visit moonboycapitalventures.com and get your hands on Hey Bro, I'm Just Trolling today. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Now let's jump back into the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I also look at the RWA space too as well, and
Yeah.
but that's always the thing is it's just kind of weird for me because like, isn't Tether RWA?
Yeah. So I'll tell you. So I have a. We're just partnering. Actually, we're partnering with the Launchpad that is focused on RWAs specifically. The thing about RWAs, I mean, what are real world assets if not like asset-backed crypto by another name? Remember, it used to
Yeah,
be called asset-backed crypto,
yeah,
and all asset-backed crypto is a security, unless like I was talking. Who was it that I met? I met somebody a little while ago, and he was trying to tell me that like he is doing RWAs out of Switzerland, and they're not considered securities. And I was like, okay, cool. So you're selling to only Swiss people, right?
but
Because I
here's
mean, like, it matters who your customers are. That's where
yeah.
the jurisdiction comes from.
Yeah, but this okay. So here's my thing, right? If you launch it on the chain, well, then it's then accessible to anyone, right? So you
Yeah.
can't really track who and who cannot really use your platform, who's using your platform. It's way too convoluted. I feel like, and I think that's where Uniswap is going to probably argue with the SEC during this lawsuit. Is like, hey, we can't really track who's using a VPN, who's not using VPN, who's American but outside, and is a resident in another country. So
Right.
there's so much stipulations with that, and it's a little bit too hard to track. And if they even go ahead and try to tackle Uniswap, there's thousands of dexes that are anonymous that people will then just gravitate towards and use if Uniswap goes down. So I just think, and there's more people launching new dexes every other day. So I'm like, I just think it's too convoluted of a problem to solve in that way by just trying to attack the industry leaders. I mean, you saw they lost, or I think the Coinbase won their lawsuit, right? Recently.
Did they?
So yeah, I think they did.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't hear about that.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I think Coinbase won their lawsuit. But anyways, they're not winning any of the law. I mean, they lost the
Yeah,
XRP
you're
thing
right.
is
They
pretty much.
did. They sued
Yeah,
them 2 days ago.
yeah.
Wow.
XRP. They're not winning any of the lawsuits. I think they're just trying. They're very very scared, and
Yeah.
I think that's probably why they're doing what they're doing to try to slow down the innovation. But the genie's out of the bottle. I feel like I don't know what your thought is
Yeah, I
on
mean,
that specifically, but it's just
it's like the gun, like it's like the feds are gonna ban like now you can 3D print a gun, and now what?
yeah, yeah,
So like how
yeah,
even how like what is a so this becoming like at some point technology kind of overtakes regulation, but then
yes,
you gotta look at the spirit of regulation and try to figure out like how to adapt it to like present day, right? I mean, it makes
yeah,
sense really that you want to protect investors. You want to protect people that are putting their money in things, that like you don't want there to be an expectation of profit and certain situations, right? Like you want to be very, very clear about what's an investment and what's a utility, for example. But how does one do that technologically? I mean, you can't. It's going to be very, very difficult over time to
it's
literally stop money from moving. I mean, even
dude,
today, mixers are a thing, right? Like you could send
yeah,
your coin over to a mixer, get the funds back. But I mean,
yeah, dude.
what ends up happening
There's 15-year-olds in like Philippines launching tokens. It's what are you
what
gonna
tends
do?
to happen is they get you on the off ramps, right? That's where they have like some full control. So
Just peer to peer.
yeah. But what ends up happening is whenever at some point, for it to be scalable, right? There has to be like a. So for example, this happened in India, right? In India, the Indian government pulled the off ramps, so they were still peer to peer for many years, but that dropped crypto volume to like a hundredth of what it used to be, or maybe a tenth of what it used to be,
Yeah,
right? Like it's not doesn't make it as scalable, and can make a huge difference, right? Like especially with with new tokens. So what ends up happening is like let's say Monero will come to an exchange. If an exchange will list it, they'll list it, and then what will happen is their banking partner will tell them, hey, you can't have a deal with Monero. So like I remember at our exchange, Signature Bank, who was our partner, is like they gave us a whole list of stuff that we had to like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. You have to KYC every single person, and like all these things. And if you don't do that, you don't have a bank account, right? And if you don't have a bank account, you
yeah,
don't have an off ramp. So basically, this becomes ultimately pretty much whatever you do over here in this like Wild West has to somehow like be mainstreamed into like the sort of sexes and the sex centralized off ramps, which is where sort of they're able to exert a great deal of pressure.
how was Dubai working before? Because with on ramping and off ramping before I know they have the 9% taxes coming up now, but how was
I don't
it?
know if
How was
that
it?
matters to. I think that's only for businesses. That's only for businesses. Is it on
Yeah.
crypto? I was
I thought it was
crypto.
9%. I thought it was 9% tax for all businesses.
Yeah. It's only for
Yeah.
businesses. That's right.
Yeah.
But it's there are certain exceptions. So I think it's up to $250,000. Like it doesn't matter. Like there's a certain thing. I don't know the details. I've got a
Yeah.
company
Yeah.
out of Dubai, and I asked a lawyer like whether it would apply to us, and he was like, no, you have to be making this much money from the country and so on before it's
Yeah.
relevant.
But that's what I'm
So
saying. It's like you can still on and off ramp in like a Dubai or like a El Salvador and like in some of these other
yeah,
areas
no,
too as
you
well.
can do any like yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like you can do everything. The question is like scalability and making like and adoption, right? Like you
Yeah,
like to be adopted. Like crypto is already too confusing. Like people are
yeah,
already losing money. Like literally sending it to the wrong wallet. And I have a friend who lost no kidding. I have a friend who lost like 5 billions of a particular token that he had been paid working for that company, right?
oh
And
wow,
yeah, so what happened is they had done an upgrade, and he post. They said if you need something, 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 post your name here. So he posted his name. He got contacted by somebody posing as a ledger official, and he like was not on his super skeptical because he replied to a post from the company, but then
yeah,
some random dude replied to him. You see what I'm saying?
oh wow,
So he ended up the guy ended up convincing him to give over his keys, and
oh
then when they
wow,
moved the money, he was because he worked at the company, was able to have the company like trace it, and they were able to see the money go. Some of the money go to a Binance wallet, some of the money go here, some of the money go there. He contacted these guys, and they were able to do it like on a very high level too, because he was in the industry, so he knew
yeah,
people like that were working there, and they were able to. But they were like, hey, without law enforcement involved, we can't even freeze the funds. And so
wow,
by the time he got law enforcement involved, all the money was gone. So like
damn,
it's so complicated even for people in the crypto industry, right? So like if
yeah,
you start doing things like peer to peer and then hoping that those are good experiences on the long run, like it's like super not sustainable, I don't think. Like you're gonna see a massive drop in
yeah,
adoption. So
yeah,
that's
yeah, for
kind of
sure.
where these regulation has to work hand in hand with people, because otherwise you won't have that. Like it comes down to what's really been the driving force behind the crypto industry lately has been the sort of cross pollination between the traditional finance industry and crypto, right? And
Yeah,
having money sort of cross pollinate. And I think if
yeah,
you close that spigot, your crypto's gonna have a really hard time to sort of get through. And I think that like I don't think people have an understanding of how big that of a of an effect just having that spigot on. I mean, the ETF thing is a prime example, right? Like ETFs allow these guys to invest in assets they would normally be able to invest in, and so that's why you're having more ETFs bought up than new Bitcoin created.
yeah,
And if that money wasn't coming in, like you wouldn't be able to do this with like degens and nerds. You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
Do you think that this cycle is going to be a bit different now because the ETFs have pumped up the price past its previous all time high before the halving? Do you see a lengthening cycle, or do you think the cycle is going to be shortened? Like, how do you foresee what's going to happen after this Bitcoin halving?
So I think that there's a lot of factors that matter probably equally, right? That we don't
Yeah,
have like enough information to. So I think one thing in the large part is like macroeconomic, like countrywide factors, right? Like so,
yeah,
you see right now inflation is inching up. The price of commodities are inching up. That's like leading to a rise in inflation, which means that the expected rate cuts that we're going to see is probably highly unlikely to materialize. I mean, I'm already seeing sort of like people walk that back because of the rise in commodities prices. Like oil is rising very significantly.
yeah, yeah,
So that it, Bitcoin crypto behaves like a tech stock, right? Ultimately, so when more funds flow into the system, more funds find themselves toward these more speculative assets like Bitcoin, and then probably even more speculative these
yeah,
altcoins and so on. So something like COVID, right? Like COVID hit everybody. Like last time there was a halving, like COVID. Killed everybody, right? Like there was like
yeah,
Bitcoin didn't really get a chance to stretch its wings because it happened to be like happening at the same time it was being knocked down by by all these other environmental factors. And I think
yeah,
that like over the next few months, there's like really anything could happen. Like I'm a by the way I'm a former political science major myself, so I've been seeing what's going on in the world, and it seems like I like call me I don't know. I feel like we're closer than ever before to some sort of massive worldwide conflagration with various different people on either side.
yeah. I
And
think so too as well. Yeah,
it's
it's
scary, and
crazy.
like nobody's investing in crypto. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah, it's crazy because Bitcoin hit all time high, and there was no FOMO. I was looking at Google Trends. Nobody was really researching it. I was like, man,
Yeah,
what's going on? It was so anticlimactic.
it is.
And I was wondering why it's like that. But I do agree that I feel like the fiat experiment is slowly coming to an end because it's getting to a point where you're having an issue with now the high interest rates plus high prices for commodities and stocks
Yeah.
and real estate. Real estate never crashed. That was another thing too. They were supposed to crash the real estate market. It didn't happen. The prices just keep going up. I'm looking around, even in developing areas around the world, globally, real estate properties are trending towards 100K plus, which is crazy.
Wow.
So
But
uh,
did real estate crash in China for a while? Like there's huge amounts of abandoned. I know in Dubai also there's huge amounts of abandoned property.
yeah, in China for sure, but I'm talking about a majority. In the majority of locations around the world, yeah, in China, yes, it did crash, but majority of places around the world, it didn't really crash. It just kept going up. If you look at the German prices, you look at France prices, you look at even a lot of areas in Africa, Eastern Europe, prices still skyrocketing. States
Right.
prices still skyrocketing. So I'm actually writing this blog, which I had to stop, called The Great Squeeze. And I actually think that we're at a inflection point, where I think the middle class is going to get eradicated completely, and they're not going to be able to
Oh,
buy anything at all. And I think that there's not much time left to be on one side of the spectrum versus another in terms of asset allocation. So either you're going to be someone who owns assets or someone who doesn't. And my target is by 2030. I think that inflation is going to continue to accelerate at this point, and they don't really care because the people who already have their bags packed, so to speak, already are in the assets, and the assets keep inflating at a higher rate, and they keep then increasing the amount for rent, increasing the amount for food, increasing the amount for gas, and until there's an inflection point where I think people then just get fed up, where they're broke and they're hungry, and that's when we both, yeah, exactly. That's when we both agree on that. I think war will probably, unfortunately, end up. I don't see any other option.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is generally like the thing that the reason I feel like almost when you have these revolutions, these sort of populist revolutions, it could almost be people that are already sort of in power going like, yo, if we don't do something quick, like
Yeah,
it's gonna get like we're gonna not even have any control over the next thing. So let's let's either
yeah.
take it down ourselves and make it seem like it's a populist uprising, or they might actually be a populist uprising, and that is something nobody wants yeah, from their
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
But yeah, I
It's
think hmm.
yeah. It's just for me. It's absolutely insane what is going on. I feel like a lot of people still aren't really noticing. Like when you talk to normies, a lot of times they they know like prices maybe are going up, and they're working their 9 to 5, but they don't know why and what is actually happening. And the wealth is
Yeah,
actually just getting stolen from them. So that's another theory that I had is what if hyper Bitcoinization does then take place, and should Bitcoin then be taxed, or would it be seen as like the euro, like the dollar, like in terms of currency exchange? I mean, it's already seen as recognized as currency in the countries, in a few countries. So when you look at
it
Central
is
African
that.
Republic and El Salvador.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I don't think so. I'll tell you, I don't think it makes sense for say like I don't think it does Bitcoin any favors to be quote unquote recognized as currency anywhere. I think if it's like it intrinsically has like in and of itself has value, just being able to transfer it from one place to another. The it's almost like if the value of FedEx was generated like from its actual moving of packages, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
so from that perspective, like I think Bitcoin would probably like endure for a while, but there's always like I think there'll be a massive have to be a massive shift before you have like they're not needing a fiat off ramp, or there not being some sort of like place where sort of this Bitcoin world and then the finance world meet, and at that point is where you're going to have see a lot of this friction where you know this is happening back in India where a lot of the exchanges were being shut down, a lot of the crypto exchanges their off-ramps were being taken. Meanwhile, decentralized exchanges, foreign exchanges were running fine. And so the
Yeah.
local exchanges, like, I'm pretty sure some of them probably snitched out some of the other guys because it really seemed like a case of sour grapes almost. Like, oh well, if we can't do it, like why are these guys allowed to do it? Because I mean that's exactly what everybody in India, most of the people that live there, they just said, okay, cool, we'll just move over to a different exchange,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, so it didn't really solve the problem. But I think like I don't see that there is an easy solution for this. I think it's going to like constantly be a tug of war. But I think the only resolution is to try to figure out, for them to try to figure out what is the spirit of the law and why does it exist in the first place, and then how do we adapt that to ensure that
Yeah.
investors are protected. So I think one of the things that sexes do, like Launchpads for that matter, like they are that decentralized due diligence layer that tends to give do some amount of due diligence on the projects that they provide their community abilities to invest in. So I think that's
Yeah.
also because what happened like back in 2019, 2020, when there was like dexes galore, there was anybody was launching a token. There was like nothing to stop you from um what's the word, and there's nothing to stop you from just
ICO.
getting it on a DEX. Exactly. Well, I mean, you
Yeah.
did an ICO first, then throw that token on. So the problem was, look, back in 2017, people were doing ICOs, but they couldn't find corresponding centralized exchanges to launch on.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they had to launch in a geographical area in order to cover certain,
Laws
in
and
order to cover
whatnot.
some. Yeah. So let's say the utility is in India, they're not going to launch on KuCoin, right? It makes
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So if it's a centralized exchange, it has to be within your jurisdiction. And then there's so many companies launching; they can only launch so much. They're young companies as exchanges. So that became like this massive crunch where essentially you have all these tokens and they can't list because there's not enough sexes that are willing to list them. There's not enough sexes out there. So then somebody came up with, okay, let's do decentralized exchanges. That way anybody can list and anybody can buy. Well, that's
Yeah.
what ended up happening. But then you had all these people losing like all this money because there was nobody actually looking into
Accountability.
token, yeah,
Yeah.
if these tokens had any value. And so then you have Launchpad sort of evolve out of that, saying, okay, look, we'll be the decentralized, due diligence layer, and so then if and then I guess institutional investors are also that provide some degree of due diligence for people. So they say, look, they're launching on this Launchpad, which is presumably launched some top projects. They also have backed by these investors that have backed a lot of really good projects. Yeah, probably they're legit. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the best way to do due diligence, but if you're a retail investor, that's probably the easiest thing that you can do to figure it out. You surely don't want to just go on. Like somebody messaged me. I don't want to say the name of the token, but somebody messaged me like out of the blue yesterday. Hey, Jason, check out Mango Man token. I don't know, and I'm just like, this is not how you make investments in crypto, bro. Like it's like some guy there's a mango token and you're like, cool, mangoes are good. Let me buy some tokens. Like
Yeah.
no, like try to figure out who the institutional investors are, what launchpad they're launching on, what
Yeah.
exchange they're launching on. Like this is how you figure these things out.
I mean, but here's the thing, man. It's so wild that you can do none of that and just invest in dog with hat, and then it becomes a $5 billion market cap.
Like Pepe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the biggest you know example. Like I remember
Yeah.
I met a Binance guy at this event, and we were talking about, because at the time I was looking at possibly listing ourselves, and I was like, so what are your criteria for listing and all? And he launched into this like how super um, exclusive they are, right? And at the end of it, I go, but did you guys list Pepe? And like you
Yeah.
could just see like the color kind of drain. He's like, yeah, we listed Pepe. I'm giving this whole spiel about how like selective they are about the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the game. At the end of the day, people want to make money, and people want to. The thing is, the free market, crypto for me is like the rawest form of
The free
financial
market.
capitalism. Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah.
just is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, the market decides. So the market says that Dogecoin should be worth 20 billion in market cap. Then that's what the market is priced it at.
The
So
one thing that it's funny. Like I love capitalism. Like I'll be like I like and then you can there's what do they call it, compassionate capitalism, John Mackey and so on. But like, my point is that like I think that builds innovation, right? So whenever I see it, like I'm happy because I always think like this is a place that's like full of life. Like in
Yeah.
Bangkok specifically, like you go down the street, like there's businesses everywhere. There's businesses upon businesses with businesses in them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, wow, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was in Georgia. I was in Georgia, I think like a couple of months ago in December, and it felt like there was so many opportunities. Like everywhere I walked, I'm like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Like
Yeah.
guys would be like, yeah, it's like freezing cold, but we're only selling ice cold coffee.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
like like the because it's former like former Soviet Union or whatever, right? Like so they still
Yeah.
got that mindset. Meanwhile, you come to like Bangkok and it's like these guys are like they're hustling upon hustling. You know, so they're
Mm-hmm.
like it fills me with joy when I walk down the street and I see these businesses and I'm just like, yeah, keep at it, guys. Like this is what it's about. This is what drives innovation. So I love it. I love
Yeah, I love capitalism too. I think the problem isn't capitalism. I think the problem is the medium of exchange for the goods and the service, because capitalism is inherently supposed to make life cheaper. Now, let me explain, right? So, if you, let's say you start a business, you start extracting value with your business, people are exchanging whatever that medium of exchange is for that good or service that you're providing. Other people see that, then they start a similar product, maybe they rebrand it or whatever, and then another person sees that it's working with that person, and he starts another business. So at some point there's an increase in supply, and if the money is fixed, well, then that means that the prices become more competitive and the values actually have to lower, right? Now, because we're in a system where they just steal wealth from us, capitalism actually makes I don't want to say it makes things more expensive, but they, through the printing of money, they force the capitalists to have to increase the prices. You know?
Oh yeah, of course,
Yeah.
because that's what printing of money does, right?
Yes, exactly. And this is the issue that's happening. That's why people then think capitalism is bad, but
Yeah.
actually, capitalism solves problems. Capitalism actually is supposed to make life cheaper. You know,
Well, there's
and
also, there's parts of like, I mean, there's parts of capitalism that are like they expect people to be disenfranchised from capitalism. So that's why they have, they built this welfare state, which is sort of the safety net
yes,
that's to pick up like the most egregious people that have missed out. That the guys, the victims of capitalism, right? But
yes.
then you have these like these sort of evil like bond villains that will be like begrudge those guys like $5 and then give
Hmm.
like corporation like $50 billion to clean up some oil spill that they did, right?
Yeah.
Like and then they'll do things in the U.S. where they'll be like, oh, now we're going to drug test all these guys on unemployment or homeless or something, and it's like, listen, these are the guys that probably need the drugs the most.
Yeah.
Like, you should be giving them the drugs. Free drugs to all homeless people. No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying. It's like
No, dude.
it's almost like, I mean, and if you look at welfare fraud, it's not even a problem. It's like a tiny amount of money that could possibly. But then you look at like the fraud that's happening on the other side. It's like billions. That's the problem. It's like be fair. If you're gonna be
Yeah.
capitalist, just be fair.
Exactly. So this is again why I know you don't like the idea of Bitcoin becoming currency. And so if you don't think Bitcoin can be currency, do you think one of the technological L1s will become a currency, or do you think that the USDT will then eventually take over as like how do you see the
All
landscape
right.
of,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
think I think what will end up happening is there'll be multiple currencies. I think like both like public sector currencies, like the fiat currencies, will
Yeah.
ultimately put on the same level as private sector assets, right? Or
Yeah.
commodities, if you want to call them that. But essentially, they perform the same function in certain cases, right? They have like distinction
Hmm.
without difference in certain situations. So I think what will end up happening is like when you see, okay, well, the U.S. dollar, they're gonna print like so many more. Like they used to have like every quarter they used to put out like the amount that they more money that they put in. Like now they don't put it out every quarter. I think they put it out like once a year or something, and then
Hmm.
they bury it like under a bunch of other stuff. So you don't even know
Hmm.
like how much money is in the system. Like if you're a tokenomics guy, you're like, well, how many tokens are there, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we're gonna keep making them. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when you make them, no, we're just gonna make them. We'll let you know
Yeah.
once. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that was fine. in crypto, right? Like,
It's crazy, dude. It's absolutely insane. But this is another thing too, as well, that I'm a little bit scared about is the introduction of a central bank digital currency. Because when I look at them sort of eradicating maybe the regional banks and then making that one central hub and then putting that on the blockchain and having everything tracked, how do you see that landscape and that kind of future? Because that's where it's heading towards, where they can try to have complete control over everything that we do and what we purchase. So what do you see as the offset of that if it's not going to be Bitcoin or crypto?
yeah, well, I do think that there's going to be like, I mean, as it is, there's a massive problem with everything being tracked. I was reading somewhere that like that fiat is almost like useless in the UK now, because of the like there's just so many people that are paying digitally, right? Like
Yes.
nobody uses like paper currency anymore. And so once you
Yeah.
start that, like pretty much everything ends up being tracked. If you have a CBDC, and then if you have a CBDC that's being tracked, uh, it can try to figure out exactly where all the money is going, right? And
Yeah.
who, what to where. It's like financial surveillance on a massive scale. So I
Yes.
think that will end up becoming more, like financial privacy is going to become more and more of an issue. I think as we said before, but there'll always be like this sort of. I assume these pirates that are the same way as they are hackers, but ultimately they lose, right? Like I mean, yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm super positive on the very 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 long term of where this will go because that's all. The government. I mean, or there's then there's a reset in government power, right? Like
Yeah.
that could happen as well. But I don't. But I think there's always going to be this sort of thing where the government wants that much power and they want to give the people like no power, and then the people
Hmm.
want that much power, and then so there's sort of this tug of war
Yeah.
where
I mean, when I look at, like I said,
Windows, right?
I,
Do you remember just to quickly say? Do you remember when Windows used to be this thing where they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have spyware in there, and like you have to be on
yeah.
the internet," and like there was a huge problem like with Windows 10, Windows 11, like everybody's like cool with it. The same thing with
Yeah.
the Xbox, like PlayStation. There was a whole thing about, oh, is this gonna need an always on internet connection? Now that's
Hmm.
pretty much the case. Nobody's
Yeah.
complaining. So it's just
Yeah.
people just
Exactly.
get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I look at that case study of El Salvador and I see what they're doing with making Bitcoin legal tender, and they buy Bitcoin, they actually have enough now in profits to pay back all of their debts from the IMF, which is crazy.
Oh wow, no
So
shit,
yeah,
really. That's
from
amazing.
buying
I
from
didn't
buying
know that.
Bitcoin, and if this case study, which is working out, currently, if it continues to work out, I do see, the sailors, the Bukelis influencing sort of, hey, maybe we should allocate a couple percent into from our treasury into Bitcoin, or a couple
Oh
percent
yeah,
into our, and
yeah. I think that will
I
definitely start happening.
yeah, and I do think if El Salvador's use case, if it becomes what I think it's going to become in the next 3, 4 to 5 years, I do see a lot of countries starting to look more into hyper Bitcoinizing and making Bitcoin legal tender like El Salvador did. And I think we'll have a competitive landscape where there will be countries that try to push for CBDC and countries that are totally against it. And I think then you would then have to decide which side of the
Which
fence you
one you
want to
want to go
lean
to?
to. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's where I think is,
definitely on the Bitcoin side of the fence on that. And I mean, I think CBDCs are a massive, danger to financial privacy for that.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I think you're right. But I think what will end up happening is you'll start seeing countries and companies allocate a certain amount of their assets to Bitcoin the same way, just to sort of like measure their risk, right? To ensure that they're protected in case of massive currency fluctuations and so on. So I think
yeah,
that'll end up happening, and I think. But will that be like 100%? Will that like replace fiat? Like I don't. I think that's like a long way off. But I think you're going to definitely see like more Michael Saylor examples. Like I think already that's increasing. He did like publicly listed companies, several publicly listed companies own Bitcoin as part of
yeah,
their treasury.
yeah.
So I think you're going to start seeing that a lot for sure.
Jason, man, I appreciate your time, man. This has been great. Where can
Hey
people
man, it's
find you
been
on the
awesome.
internet?
Yeah, it's great chatting. Jason DOTX on Twitter. I'm at Jason Fernandes.eth on Instagram. Yeah, I think that's what jasonfernandes.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And
Yeah.
AdLumen, where can people find that on the internet?
Yeah, it's AdLunam, ADLUNAM.cc. That's at AdLunam Inc. on Twitter. And then let's see. I think it's AdLunam Inc. on Instagram as well. By the way, AdLunam means to the moon in Latin. AdLunam.
I
So
love it. I love that,
yeah.
man. Do you have any closing thoughts before we go?
Well, I mean, I just think so now as far as Bitcoin is concerned, I think that we're gonna see a little bit of a rough ride for a little bit. Like we're doing good today, but
Yeah.
I don't. I think that's because people haven't quite. It hasn't quite sunk in that there probably won't be a rate cut this month. And if all these things came together, we'd have like a huge halving situation. But I think this is gonna be a little bit more of a whimper than we expected. Unfortunately, we'll see. I hope it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. I appreciate you for coming on, man. Thank you for your
Hey, pleasure
time.
chatting.